Keep watching to find out how the law protects consumers from unethical debt collectors.
Welcome to the YouTube channel of Michael J. Swanson. Michael is the author of How David Beats Goliath and is the CEO of Advocate Capital. And now, here's Michael.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you bet. Well, what are some of the more common violations that you see by some of these aggressive debt collectors? What is some of the tactics or things that they do that they shouldn't be doing?
So it depends on the community. I think with a community that's like an immigrant community, they always make false representation that we've got the sheriff coming to your house and you're going to get locked up, or threatening them with jail time, or lying to them about what they're going to do, which explicitly under the law you can't do. You can't make up a lie in the process of trying to collect the debt. Yeah. Whether that's making a false representation that the sheriff is on the way to someone's house and scaring people into making some sort of payment, making a false representation that you have a judgment against somebody when you don't. Okay. Or making a representation that this person owes more money than they did. So a lot of times what happens is the consumer may owe $1,000 on the debt and be behind on it. And then the debt collector is trying to recover for $2,000 by tacking on things that they're not entitled to tack on, whether it's costs that were never part of the contract for them to tack on, or fees, or interest that's calculated wrongly. And you'd be surprised. We have cases where a consumer will contact us and say, I had this debt, I owed this money, I negotiated and settled it 2 years ago with XYZ debt collector. And now ABC debt collector is coming after me for the same debt. Well, guess what happened in that case is that debt was sold either to multiple debt collectors or XYZ debt collector collected the money and then packaged that debt that they had and sold it to an unknowing third-party debt collector who thinks he's still entitled on that debt.
Wow, what a shady business.
It's unbelievable. There's a great book, and I don't remember who the author is. It's called Bad Paper. It's an eye-opener for anyone who's interested in the debt collection practices happening across our nation. It's really unbelievable of some of the characters that actually are involved in this debt collection process. But I recommend it for anyone who's interested. I wish I had the name of the author, but the name of the book is Bad Paper.
Bad Paper. Okay, we'll find that and put a link to it under the video or the podcast information, so our viewers can track that down. So isn't the government protecting people from this stuff?
They are by virtue of the laws that are in place, the FDCPA, and then your state may have an equivalent statute that provides additional safeguards. California, for example, has a Rosenthal Act, the RFDCPA, which gives you additional protections. There are statutory damages for the consumer. So under the FDCPA, you're entitled to up to $1,000 for the violation. So if you're being sued on this on a collection item, and not only do you get to be represented by an attorney for free, who can then recover their costs from the other side, but you do also have statutory damages that you can recover. So there are protections in place, and these are not new laws. They've been around since the 60s, and the unfortunate part is a lot of consumers just don't know about them.
Yeah. So, but if I understand it correctly, it's lawyers like you who are actually giving those laws teeth and actually, I guess, more or less enforcing them or taking advantage of those laws on behalf of the consumers. They're not a bunch of government regulators running around here. It's up to lawyers, right?
Absolutely. It's up to lawyers and community consumer advocates in the community to push this. I remember one of the very first cases we came across was in the context of a personal injury case. We had resolved the personal injury case. We had settled the case for a client and then negotiated their medical bills down. And a few years after that case resolved, we got a call from our client saying, hey, I thought when our case resolved, you took care of you negotiated the medical liens with these doctors. And we said, yes, we did. We have the contracts where they, took reductions on their fees or their charges. And what had happened in that case is the doctor in that case had settled the personal injury claim with our client, and a few years later sold it to a debt collector to recover the difference, in the hopes that By that point, the client had forgotten what had happened. We had forgotten. And lo and behold, we're like, wait a minute, you've already been paid on this. You can't do it. So there are a lot of crazy violations out there that you wouldn't believe. We're not talking about the debt collector or financial institution who's following the law and is doing what they're entitled to do, which is to recover the debt. We're talking about people who are breaking the law, bending any rule that's there to safeguard consumers in the hopes of taking advantage of the consumer. And the only defense that people have against that are consumer attorneys who are able to actually educate not only their clients on the law. Very early on when we started doing this, we also sometimes had to even educate the court on the law.
Really?
Mr. Kazerouni, let me understand this. Your client owes money to XYZ bank and they're suing that bank? Yes, Your Honor, we are, because the bank didn't follow the rules that are in place that we all have to follow.
Yeah, well, I'm thankful there are lawyers like you who will take those cases on and fight for people. And like you say, oftentimes it's probably immigrant folks who don't speak English as a native, their first language. I worry. My mom is in her 80s. And I always tell her, if someone calls you, don't talk to anybody on the phone because, there's scams. I've been getting robocalls the past few days, like a robot voice saying they're going to cancel my social security number if I don't call them. So many crazy things happening out there. So I'm glad that there are lawyers like you doing that.
So you mentioned robocalls and your mother as well. So immigrant community is one. The other one is people like your mom, the elderly community. And they're protected by multiple statutes because not only do you have the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, but you also have elder abuse statutes across the country that people can use to go after them. And they target them because they know they're vulnerable. And it's unbelievable what you see. And in my opinion, in the next few years, you're going to see a huge uptick on that because of the state of the economy. That's what we witnessed back in 2007 and 8, leading all the way through, probably 2013 when things started slowing down a little bit. But it's something that will definitely spike, I think, as it did back in 2007. People are going to be considering bankruptcies because they just can't keep up anymore with their obligation. And it's not because they're bad people and they didn't intend to pay their debts. It's because they're not in a position to be able to keep up with their bills because either, losing their job or because of other issues, medical issues. I mean, if take for example, someone who may contract COVID now, right? And they're out of commission for a while, even if they had a job. Well, if they fall back and if they were living paycheck to paycheck, catching up is going to be extremely difficult for that individual.
How could a lawyer like you help someone in that situation?
Well, it's the first step would be find out where they're at. What stage are they at? Are we able to reach out to the bank and or the debt collector and see if we can come up with terms that's acceptable for them? You have to look at the realities of the consumer's ability to be able to pay back. The bank is entitled to get paid, but if a consumer has to make a decision between having a roof over their head or feeding themselves and their kid and paying a credit card, I think naturally, while they would like to pay the credit card, they need to take care of themselves first before they can be in a position to pay back. So initially, it's to take a look at, can we do something for you as a consumer in negotiating some sort of payment structure that would assist you if you're able to do that. And if not, if they're at a stage where they come to the conclusion that I can't pay it and now the debt collection process has started, if they are being sued in court, it would be a question of, can we defend them and finding out, finding some sort of leverage in litigation to allow the bank to come to their senses and realize that maybe getting a judgment against this individual is only going to push them closer to a bankruptcy and cause nobody to recover anything. And if the consumer is contacting us beyond that, whether it's taking a look at what type of collection activity is actually happening, and if those activities fall outside the bounds of the law. If they do, then that's a sword in the consumer's hand, because now they can go on the offensive. And instead of saying, I can't deal with this, they say they're going to basically fight back and say, I can't deal with this, but you're not allowed to do this to me. And that by virtue of the fact that you're now going on the offensive, the debt collector now has to consider whether it's worth pursuing that $500 medical bill that you couldn't pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had cases over $80 that a consumer was not able to pay that ended
Really?
up putting $1,000 in the consumer's pocket because the violations were so outrageous. I'm talking about a debt collector calling your neighbors and asking them to let the deadbeat next door know to call them about this medical debt.
Oh my gosh.
I'm talking about people getting calls at their work where their supervisors are asked why they keep employing somebody who's not ethical and is not paying their bills.
Crazy.
These affect people, and all of those things are against the law.
Right.
And so to answer your question, it just depends on where they're at. The consultation is free. Consumer attorneys nationwide are able to help you. I think that the key is to educate consumers so they know they have these rights, and they know that there are attorneys like us who are able to give them free consultations and hopefully represent them for free if we can find the violations and go after the scrupulous debt collectors.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do today, is educate people about these matters. I'm learning right now. I love doing this. I learn something new every day. Before I forget, if someone had a question for you after watching this video, how might they get a hold of you?
So I think the best place to start it is our website, which is www.kazlg.com. All our attorneys, we have 22 attorneys at our firm, can be contacted through the website. There is a ton of information about the different area of law. The FDCPA is not a long statute, but it has a lot of intricacies. And you can find some of the most common violations on our website. And just to kind of tie in another thing, usually people that have debt collection issues also have other issues. Fair Credit Reporting Act is one of them. Things end up on people's credit reports that that shouldn't be there. That's just inaccurate. And so there's a ton of information on our website. That's the best place to start. And then if they want to contact us, obviously our toll-free number is 800-400-6808.
Mike, thanks again for being here. I know you're very busy managing all those 11 offices around the country and helping people. So we really appreciate it. Keep up the great fight.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
You bet.
Thanks for watching. Send your questions or comments to Michael at mike@howdavidbeatsgoliath.com.